and NSFAF board members present, university vice chancellors, the president of the Association of Private Higher Education Institutions in Namibia, the CEOs and the entire leadership of our public enterprises, deans, directors, professors, and lecturers, TVET center managers and heads of department, leaders of all our tertiary education institutions present, esteemed invited guests, captain of industry present, student organizations leadership, student leaders, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to officiate at this important higher education and training leadership and stakeholders consultative engagement. I wish to thank you all for prioritizing this engagement. We value your commitment as we strive to work together to make the higher education and training sector more responsive and relevant to contemporary needs and challenges. This internal consultation is imperative, and it comes at an opportune time for us all as important active participants in the Namibian higher education and training sector. We urgently need to reflect on our different and shared assigned mandates in the higher education and training sector. We urgently need to engage each other as keen participants and committed providers of one of the most transformative and influential public goods, the formal education to the Namibian nation. We urgently need to assess whether or not we are adequately fulfilling our roles and functions. We also urgently need to share our explicit and implicit sector-specific experiences, challenges, and observations. And of course, we urgently need to discuss all this with a view to mapping out workable strategies and lasting solutions to many of the challenges and problems we face. I believe the outcome of these 3 days' work will put us on a positive path towards positioning and aligning the higher education and training sector to current and future needs of Namibia's economy and industry. Over 33 years, the government of the Republic of Namibia has developed policies, systems, and human capital and established institutions to consolidate, fortify, and implement one quality national education system. We have built a formal education system that is clearly defined by levels and numbers of years at each of these levels. This very formal education system has distinct exit points. It also has what we call requisite transitional knowledge, skills, and competencies that are expected at each of the exit points. Our formal education system also has the process of certification that authenticates whatever level of qualification we attain at each level. And these levels are well articulated to the next in most cases. As you are aware, our higher education and training sector has regulatory bodies to control and keep standards, to maintain quality, and to safeguard the minimum standards as well as the national qualifications framework. As higher education and training sector leaders, you are knowledge workers and key role players, as well as custodians of the minimum standards and the national qualifications framework, along with many of our SOEs that are responsible for regulating. For example, the National Qualifications Authority, which is the administrative arm for the NQF, on behalf of government, for use and adherence to by all higher education and training providers, as well as by key stakeholders. I believe you will agree with me that the NQF is the common denominator for academic programs accreditation and higher education and training qualifications proof or authentication and indeed articulation. It is critical that certificate and diploma offering institutions work hard to establish the articulation path or the academic upward progression from each level. And that is from the certificate, from the diploma, to the degree, and so forth, up to the doctoral level. Institutions should address and deal with the compatibility of lower and higher academic programs between and amongst themselves as a priority. Why are we saying this as a ministry? The challenge we have sometimes is that you will have an institution that is offering a certificate, for example, but this certificate, when you look at it, particularly when students begin to come to our offices, it is a cul-de-sac, it is a dead end. It is not articulated to any of the diplomas in the same field maybe, or in related fields in the country. The universality of education and training is key and should underlie development and expansion of the sector. Compatibility of lower and higher education programs should be sought out earlier during programs development and offering. And this should not be left to students to struggle with upon completion of their studies, because some of them, in fact many of them, particularly at certificate level, they want to progress to the next level. But if such a certificate is obtained from a university, or rather not a university, maybe a college or whatever institution that did not look into that process of articulation, it becomes a problem for the student. Thank you. I'm saying compatibility of lower and higher education programs should be sought out earlier during programs development as well as during the time they are being offered, and they should not be left to students to struggle with after completion of their studies. Students are the raw materials in our sector, and their education and training can be equated to a value chain that is developed and refined at each and every level by different institutions and indeed by different players. As students formally transition from lower level to higher level, for example, in the same field of study, or in the same institution, or across institutions, that process should be seamless and problem-free. Basically, what I'm saying here, it is our responsibility as higher education institutions and training institutions to actually begin quite early as we develop our programs to engage each other and see the progression path and be in a position to communicate and enlighten our students about the possibility of articulating at institution B or institution C upon completing their studies. The higher education and training fraternity, leadership, and key stakeholders are gathered here to deliberate on critical issues of this sector in the midst of many reforms and in the midst of changes, developments, and challenges, many of which call on us to re-examine and institute proactive strategies and policies on some of these critical areas. I would like to outline some of those critical areas, and I know many of you also have some of the critical areas. One of those is teacher training. Teacher training. The admission requirements at tertiary level, that's two. Learners requisite transitional knowledge, skills, and competencies at different exit points. Number four, balancing exponential demand for higher education and training and access. Number five, proper placement of TVET on our national qualification framework. Positioning, number six, positioning and aligning, or rather alignment of higher education and training institutions programs to the needs of emerging fields, new emerging fields. Number seven, proper articulation. I think the minimum standards have actually addressed that. Proper articulation between TVET and higher education for upward mobility. Next, adapting and harnessing the fourth industrial revolution and other emerging technologies to optimize teaching and learning benefits. Employing effective strategies to deepen the acquisition of employability skills and reducing graduates' unemployment. And next, regularizing research channels in the field of education and the labor market. It is important that tertiary education institutions are clearly differentiated and categorized according to their known expected levels of knowledge and skill and the skill set they offer. I think again, the minimum standards has actually to some extent addressed that. As higher education and training institutions discharge their fundamental role of teaching and learning through diverse and complementary programs, the aim should be to develop knowledge and skills for multiple career pathways and increased students' versatility and employability. Experience has shown that through strategic alliances and partnerships, higher education and training institutions can achieve a lot. Exchanges and exposure deepen and widen theoretical knowledge and technical skills of those involved, mainly students and staff. There has to be a deliberate and purposeful effort at all levels of higher education and training to extend the teaching and learning environment beyond campuses, lecture halls, and workshops. Namibia is 7 years away from the end of our Vision 2030, and it is evident that for Namibia to become an industrialized and knowledge-based society, the higher education and training sector has to be consistently aligned to the wider socio-economic needs of the country. That is because changes in the country's economic growth points precipitate changes in the education sector, particularly in the higher education and training sector. Currently, the following fields are important to look at and explore in the context of what is happening in Namibia as a result of new changes, new developments, and indeed discoveries. The STEM subjects are so critical and fundamental. That is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but also agriculture, renewable energy, oil and gas, green hydrogen, some TVET trades such as electrical, boiler making, welding, mechatronics, safety and security, construction, and many others. Quality and relevance are inherent features of higher education and training that institutions must strive to uphold and maintain. The quality of a nation's education system is as solid as is the quality of its teachers, its curriculum, the infrastructure at its disposal, and indeed the quality of students. All these key components point to the important proper education planning, deployment of qualified education planners, carrying out continuous and targeted research in the sector itself and in the industry. I really need to stress in the sector itself, because you find that sometimes when one is attending global conferences representing our country, we tend to rely on outdated data. We tend to rely on outdated data, which means we are in this important sector of higher education and training. This is where the consolidation of experts are, but somehow we don't look inward when it comes to research. Readily available and up-to-date data on the Namibian education sector, including the subsectors of basic education, TVET, and higher education, are scarce, but very highly required. So we need really to do something about this. Now, before I conclude, I would like to go back to some of those areas that I mentioned, which I would like to leave with us as questions that perhaps we may need to really delve into during this 3 days. Teacher education. We know that with the reforms within the basic education, we now need specialized teachers to oversee the advanced subsidiary leg. Do we perhaps, particularly those who are in the business of training teachers, maybe a question will do, what do we need to expand to ensure that the teacher training that we do brings in the necessary elements needed to adequately address the need of the subsidiary education teachers? The next question that I would like to leave with us is admission requirements at tertiary level. To some extent, the minimum standards address that. But the issue of mixed ability students in one class, maybe to some extent that the minimum standards will address that, but currently as we speak, I believe these are some of the things we are grappling with. A student who has completed grade 11 and one grade 12, but both first years. Are we doing justice? The next thing that we need to define and probably be well conversant with as people who work the knowledge of this country is the learner's requisite transition knowledge, skills, and competences. Those who come to us, or to you, not us at the ministry, but us, yes, at first year, what is it that they should come with in terms of competences, knowledge, and skills that can help them to adjust and adapt better and make sure that they don't overstay, they actually move, they progress as required. Another important area that I would like us to look at is proper placement of TVET on the National Qualification Framework. I think it's critical because we cannot have a component of our formal education system that is still hanging and not properly aligned. With that, I wish to now conclude. I would like to conclude by thanking all of you once again for responding to the invitation to attend this consultative engagement. Your attendance and participation is highly acknowledged. I have no doubt that this leadership and key stakeholders consultative engagement will achieve its objectives. I wish us all successful deliberations, and I thank you.